When I was younger, I wanted to be a novelist. A few days a week, I sat down at my CRT computer screen running Windows XP and wrote the beginnings of novels. I say the beginnings because I never got past the start of any of them. I would start off enchanted with a new idea, and as I got further in, become discouraged as I started to only see the flaws. But it didn't matter. The next story would be better, so I started another. You can see where this is going. Nothing was ever good enough. I saw how hard it was to write and how much I had to improve to be where I wanted to be, so I quit. When I first saw Only Yesterday, I loved it. Only Yesterday opens with Taiko, a 27-year-old woman, planning a trip to the country for a working holiday. The film then cuts to a flashback about her childhood desire to go on a trip to the country. As she gets moving on her trip, she slips into more reminiscence about her experiences as a 10-year-old girl. The rest of the movie continues in this fashion, split between the past and the present. When I first saw Only Yesterday, I hadn't seen many Ghibli films. I saw the film at my local theatre, which I'd barely been to before, and I came out the other side thinking the film was great. A couple of years later, I rewatched Only Yesterday with my family. My mum had never seen the movie, and I had never seen it in Japanese, so we watched it together. This time, I didn't love it the same way I had. Only Yesterday is a really good film. It's about growing up and wondering how your past made you into the person you are today. It's filled with nostalgia and the incredible art you can expect from a Studio Ghibli film, and watching it is a lovely experience. But it's not perfect. It's a slow-moving movie. Although the film starts off telling us Taiko is going on a trip to the country, that isn't what happens next. First, she has a flashback, then finishes packing and talks to her sister on the phone in between a few flashbacks. She arrives at the train platform, has a flashback, gets on the train, has a flashback, goes to sleep, has another flashback. Finally, almost 40 minutes into the movie, she arrives at the country town she's visiting. Out of the first 40 minutes of the film, about 4 minutes are spent progressing the present-day story. Of course, this is a simplistic way to look at the opening of the film. I didn't discuss what actually happens in the flashbacks, which is enormously important to the film. Each flashback shows a short portion of time from 1966, when Taiko was a schoolgirl living in Tokyo. They show a time when she wanted to go on a trip to the country, then a time when she was scolded for not eating all of her school lunches and tried to eat them, then the first time a boy had a crush on her, then the time that a period craze happened at school. After all that, she arrives at the country town. The flashbacks aren't supposed to move the present-day plot along. They're there for their own sake. The flashbacks help you understand Taiko as a character. As Taiko reminisces about her 5th grade self, you get into her headspace by watching her memories along with her, and listening to her present-day commentary on the events.
We couldn't stop laughing as the memories came flooding back.
There's a real sense of nostalgia here that other films don't often capture. In some ways, the film isn't about present-day Taiko, it's about her childhood. As the film moves forward though, the present-day events become more important. Taiko's flashbacks are still prominent, but there are also long stretches of the present-day story. Clearly, the present day isn't unimportant to the film, but the start of the story front-loads the flashbacks to the point that anything outside of them seems unimportant. Taiko's voiceover does some work to bridge that gap by helping you understand why these memories matter to modern-day Taiko, but it's a strange transition that the film makes, from barely 4 minutes of non-flashback time in 40 minutes, to spending real effort developing the characters and scenarios in the present day. Knowing the ending of a story often lets you look for foreshadowing, new connections, and symbolism that you missed the first time around. But Only Yesterday's flashbacks are pretty straightforward. They're nostalgic, emotional tales about Taiko's past, and they don't benefit much from a rewatch. In the flashbacks, Taiko is 10 years old. I quit writing when I was about 12. I couldn't write something good without putting a lot of effort in, and improving seemed too hard. But being hard doesn't mean it's not worthwhile. To become a better writer, you have to practice, which means writing, even if it doesn't turn out well. Looking back on it, I was right about the quality of my writing, but I enjoyed doing it, and if I'd kept going, the quality would have improved. Disliking your previous work is part of the cycle of growth as an artist. If you can tell that what you're creating has flaws and you're dissatisfied with it, you're only a step away from improving. Reevaluating art is part of experiencing it more than once. It doesn't have to be a bad thing. Sometimes it is, like when you go back to a thing you loved and think, oh, that's kinda racist. But often, it's just that your subjective experience of the work has changed. This reevaluation isn't exclusive to the audience either. Artists change their mind about their creations fairly frequently. H-Bomber and Shannon Strucci recently did a video on director's cuts, which touches on a few examples of filmmakers wishing they had made different choices in the original cuts of their films. It's linked in the description, and it's way more detailed than I have time to do here, so go check it out after the video. Ultimately, very few of the directors they cited actually went back and changed their films, and the ones who did, didn't always make something better. When I came back to writing after giving it up, it really sucked. I hadn't gotten any better at writing, but I had gotten better at critiquing writing, and all I could see were the flaws. I didn't go back to writing the same genre or style as before. My interests were pretty different 10 years later, so it made sense to reflect that in what I wrote. I came up with an idea and set to work, but after a few scenes, the story collapsed. The idea wasn't interesting, my writing wasn't interesting, and I wasn't sure where to go with the story. This time, instead of deciding improvement was too hard, I refocused on getting better. I started to write short stories. I would write them over the course of a few afternoons, edit them for a day or two, and then declare them done, even if they weren't very good. Looking back on the stories I wrote at that time, I can see it as part of a very specific time in my life. I was creatively drained, I was discouraged about my lack of innate ability, and I needed an easy win. With everything I've created, there has been an ebb and flow to my feelings during the process. When the idea is shiny and new, everything I do seems amazing. In the middle of the project, everything seems terrible, and it seems like I'll never finish. But then I do finish, and it feels great and scary at the same time. It isn't perfect, but it exists. Once a work is released, it's pretty rare for an artist to go back to it, but it does happen. The Hobbit was reissued with significant changes in order to better fit with The Lord of the Rings, for example. At the time he wrote it, Tolkien had no plans to write a direct sequel to The Hobbit, but later on, he changed his mind, and so he changed the book. But by and large, this isn't how things are done. Once something is out there, it's out there. Thanks to the internet, that's more true now than ever before. This video could still be watchable 5 or 10 years from now. It could be just as available as well, even if I've changed my mind about the things that I say in it. I could go back and edit my videos to reflect my changing views on a topic, but there's no way to grow and make new things while also obsessing over your past work. If I could send only one piece of writing advice back to my 11-year-old self who was about to quit, it would be this. There's value in finishing something bad. Finishing anything is a worthwhile experience that'll make your next project better. And if you get caught up on whether it's good or bad before it's done, it'll hinder your growth. At least half of the writing process is in rewriting. Until you have something that can be edited, you can't learn how to edit. It's the same with most creative pursuits. You learn so much by bringing a work to its conclusion that can't be learned by endlessly polishing it. Even if you do endlessly polish it, it will never be perfect. At some point, the audience has to see it, and you have to move on. While rewatching only yesterday for this video, I realized that I love this film. It's weird and flawed and beautiful. It doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to exist. I'm only at the start of my journey as a writer and a video editor, so my videos aren't going to be perfect. My videos will increase in quality and the old ones will look worse in comparison, but that's unavoidable. Making bad work is part of improving. All I can do is make the best video I can at the time, and when I'm done, move on to something new. When I quit writing, I did it because I was scared I'd never be good enough. It seems silly to say it, but you can't be good enough if you don't even try. When I write today, I'm honoring an old dream I had. The afternoons I spent dreaming up stories and writing them into my word processor all led me here. Only Yesterday is fascinated with the past. Taiko's childhood in the 1960s and the history of the creation of Safflower Rouge are central to the film. But the last thing that happens in the film actually takes place in the present. When Taiko is asked to marry Toshio, she refuses. The next day, she packs her things and leaves, and then, on the train, she looks out the window and realizes she wants to go back. It's left up to the audience to interpret exactly why she changes her mind, but the broad strokes are clear. She wants something she didn't realize she wanted. She gets off her train leaving Yamagata and gets on the one heading towards it to reunite with Toshio and start a new life. As she makes this new start, the film doesn't end on a shot making us imagine her future. Instead, the final shot of the movie rests on 11-year-old Taiko. As Taiko watches her future self disappear into the distance with Toshio, she isn't smiling or frowning, she's just watching, as the person she became leaves her behind. This is the first video on my channel, but it won't be the last, so subscribe if you enjoyed this one. I plan to make videos about stories and storytelling, and for the next 4 weeks there will be 1 video a week going up on the channel. Clicking the like button or leaving a comment can really help new channels grow, so hit all of the good buttons below the video if you want to support me.